It may still be 2025,
but 2026 politics are in full swing in Georgia.
Little preview of the Senate race here in the great state of Georgia. How'd they do, ladies and gentlemen? Do good?
And national figures on both sides of the aisle are already making their way to Georgia and testing out themes for 2026.
Well, I think the message that resonates is that we need to deal with the economic divide, that we need to raise wages in this country.
Meanwhile, the fights over how elections are administered locally are putting some elected officials in jeopardy of jail time.
And I'm willing to face those consequences because I cannot and I will not cast my vote for people who are actively undermining not only our elections, but our democracy.
And a Georgian who rose to national prominence during the 2020 election steps away from politics. But maybe not for long.
Someone's going to get hurt, someone's going to get shot, someone's going to get killed.
I'm WABE's Brendan Rivers in for Sam Greenglass.
And I'm WABE politics reporter Rahul Bali. And this is Plugged In from WABE.
Okay, Rahul, let's start with the ongoing fight in Fulton County, where county commissioners are being threatened with jail time for defying a judge's order by refusing to appoint 2 Republican nominees to the county's elections board.
So the Democrats on this commission have objected to the reappointment of Julie Adams and the appointment of Jason Frazier over their past actions. Adams abstained from certifying primary election results last year, and Frazier has challenged the eligibility of thousands of Fulton County voters. As with many election and voting issues, this has ended up in the courts. Earlier this month, Senior State Judge David Emerson ruled the law does not give commissioners discretion to reject the appointments if not otherwise qualified to do so. The courts have continuously sided with Republicans throughout the appeals process, which brings us to Wednesday's commission meeting. Democratic Commissioner Mo Ivory explained why she was going to again vote against the 2 Republican nominees.
The court has ruled. I respect the authority of the court, but I also, like has been mentioned, have a duty to the people that I represent. The act of voting itself is discretionary. Any vote, the ones we take here or the one that you cast when you vote in an election. Discretionary. Nobody can tell you what or how you should vote.
Commissioners did take that vote, with 3 Democratic commissioners missing for various reasons. That included Commission Chair Rob Pitts, which meant Vice Chair Republican Bob Ellis was running the meeting.
This is a matter that has been sort of well documented, and it's been set up on partisan lines all along, and it looks like it's going to be set up on partisan lines today, but maybe there'll be a miracle. So let's open up the vote.
And the vote is open. And the motion fails. 2 yeas, 2 nays.
Okay, so what happens now, Rahul?
So the commissioners defying the judge's order could be held in contempt. Georgia GOP Chairman Josh McCoon told me that Judge Emerson should fine Fulton County daily and jail commissioners who were defying the order. Democratic Commissioner Dana Barrett addressed that during Wednesday's meeting.
Well, again, I respect the rule of law, and I have the courage of my convictions to be here today and take a vote, unlike some of my colleagues who do not. I do also appreciate that my actions have consequences, and I'm willing to face those consequences because I cannot and I will not cast my vote for people who are actively undermining not only our elections, but our democracy.
Republican Commissioner Bridget Thorne, who's been leading the effort on these appointments, defended Adams and Frazier.
Election deniers undermine our faith. That's so ridiculous. What is an election denier? Election denier is anybody who wants integrity in our elections. By state law, we need to reconcile that the number of people voted equals the number of ballots cast. We do not obey that law. There is a new rule that we have to do it before certification. That is why Julie Adams her lawsuit was, I need information to make sure that the number of people voted equals the number of ballots cast. That's called integrity. That's called checks and balances. That's called transparency.
I should point out that while some Republicans continue to subscribe to these unfounded theories of widespread fraud caused by current elections equipment and voting laws, other Republicans, most notably Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, have defended the voting process. As we tape this, we are watching for the next steps from Judge Emerson following Wednesday's Fulton County Commission vote.
And President Donald Trump took to his social media site Truth Social this week, where he wrote that he plans to get rid of mail-in voting and electronic voting machines through an executive order.
So he also talked about it while he was in the White House this week.
We're going to start with an executive order that's being written right now by the best lawyers in the country to end mail-in ballots because they're corrupt.
Central to many of these unfounded claims of widespread voter fraud are the use of mail-in ballots and electronic voting machines. Legal and voting experts tell NPR that the president lacks the legal authority to even do this. But look, beyond that, there's the reality of making this happen in time for the 2026 midterm elections. I spoke to a key Republican state lawmaker on this issue. I caught up with State Senator Rick Williams of Milledgeville, who's the vice chair of the State Senate Ethics Committee. That's the committee that considers elections and voting legislation. Williams, who's also a former elections official, doesn't think it's realistic to implement a new system in time for the 2026 Georgia Party primaries. Those are scheduled in May.
You can start conversations now, but when you implement this whole new system, it's going to take some time, and it's going to take some getting used to and a lot of thoughts. This is a big wheel with a lot of cogs on it, and so each cog turns another cog on another wheel. So it's not just very simple, cut and dry. One thing is going to have an effect and possibly an unintended consequence on something else, that everything's going to have to be looked at. So they can start talking about it now.
Williams went on to say if the federal government did get involved, it would have to play a major role in the process.
Well, it's very important if they do step in and if they start dictating to all 50 states how elections are going to be run, then it's going to be up to the feds to put the money in to help make sure that everything is operating smoothly, that all equipment, all procedure, all supplies would be uniform. So it's going to have to be some federal money put in this also to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Over on the State House side, there's a special committee holding hearings on this topic. It's going to be interesting to see what legislation comes out for the upcoming General Assembly, which starts in January.
Now, there was also news this week involving some of the defamation lawsuits filed in the aftermath of the 2020 elections. Conservative cable news network Newsmax will pay $67 million to settle with Dominion Voting Systems. Dominion accused Newsmax of spreading false claims that the company's voting technology had been manipulated to help Joe Biden beat Donald Trump. Some of the claims centered on Georgia, where Dominion machines continue to be used. In a statement, Newsmax says its reporting was not defamatory, and they believe they weren't going to get a fair trial from the Delaware judge overseeing the case. Dominion also settled a similar lawsuit against Fox News for $787 million.
One last item on this thread of election and voting stories we're doing. As a notable name in this space has stepped down. Until last Friday, Gabriel Sterling was the chief operating officer for the Georgia Secretary of State's office, which oversees elections in the state. He came to national and international attention in the aftermath of the 2020 elections when President Donald Trump was claiming that he had won the state of Georgia. It led to this moment during a state capitol press conference when Sterling called on Trump to condemn his supporters who were threatening violence against election workers.
Mr. President, it looks like you likely lost the state of Georgia. We're investigating. There's always a possibility. I get it. And you have the rights to go through the courts. What you don't have the ability to do, and you need to step up and say this, is stop inspiring people to commit potential acts of violence. Someone's going to get hurt. Someone's going to get shot. Someone's going to get killed. And it's not right.
Brendan, I caught up with Sterling at the Georgia Chamber's Congressional Luncheon.
Well, it was 6.5 years all in. And, you start in something in the Secretary of State's office in Georgia. It's like, this is a boring backwater state constitutional office. Little could we have anticipated what we saw. But, I feel good about the work we've done. I feel great about where Georgia is. I feel great the work we've done for Georgia voters. And we're looked at nationally as a model on how to run great elections, and the voters agree.
I also asked him to take us back to 2020 and what he went through.
It was a learning experience. Adversity can kind of show you what you think and what you are when you're trying to get through something. Because you always say, I can handle adversity, but you never know until you're challenged. So it was a growing experience.
As for the future, Sterling is considering getting into the Republican primary to replace his boss, Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger. But of course, that depends on what Raffensperger decides to do in 2026.
All right, let's take a break here. And when we come back, Rahul, you're going to take us on the road to Columbus, Peachtree City, and Lakewood to hear from some national figures who came to Georgia and 4 people who want to be Georgia's next U.S. Senator.
You're listening to Plugged In from WABE.
Welcome back to Plugged In from WABE.
Brendan, before we get rolling with this segment, I wanted to thank you for filling in during these 2 weeks for Sam while he's away.
Yeah, of course. Always happy to help out.
So the top candidates for the 2026 U.S. Senate race in Georgia made their way to Columbus on Wednesday for the Georgia Chamber Congressional Luncheon. We believe that this was the first time that these top 4 were in the same room. The audience inside the Columbus Convention and Trade Center included about 1,000 Georgia business, civic, and political leaders. Democratic incumbent U.S. Senator Jon Ossoff was one of the first speakers. He blasted several Trump administration policies, including the handling of foreign aid, industrial policy, and trade and tariffs.
We are alienating key international partners while paralyzing much of the business community because you don't know what the rules of the road for international trade will be from one day to the next, let alone from one quarter or year to the next. And so you can't make informed decisions about how your supply chains will operate.
Brendan, I want you and our audience to remember what you just heard for later in the show. Also appearing on the stage, but separately, was Republican Congressman and U.S. Senate candidate Mike Collins. One of the issues he talked about, insurance.
Insurance has gone sky high. And until we get true tort reform on the federal level, you're not going to fix this problem out there. I don't care if it's health care or if it's your general liability insurance. And we're going to drop tort reform in September, and we're going to make sure that Georgia companies are able to make sure that these frivolous lawsuits and these nuclear verdicts are done away with.
Tort reform. I'm glad Sam's not here. He'd be having flashbacks with all the reporting he's done on this recently.
Yeah, I want to remind our audience, the Georgia General Assembly, backed by a full court press by Governor Brian Kemp, passed a tort reform package, also known as lawsuit reform or civil litigation reform. Those are the rules of the road when someone files a lawsuit, like after a car accident or falling in a store. Collins is talking about it on the federal level. So I caught up with him after he spoke to the chamber audience.
What we've seen over the years, especially in things like permitting, whether it's for roads or anything that deals with the federal government, that the permitting process just gets held up for decades. And so you take that and you couple that with the amount of lawsuits that go to the federal courts, and you've seen just these out-of-control nuclear verdicts from people that are just suing for needless things that really shouldn't be in court.
Basically, Collins wants the losers of what he calls frivolous lawsuits to pay legal fees. Again, Collins is talking about cases that go through the federal courts. Another example he gave was the trucking industry, which, of course, is his family's business.
Okay, Rahul, tell us about the 2 other Senate candidates who went to Columbus.
Yeah, Congressman Buddy Carter also appeared on stage.
We are going to have the opportunity now to start focusing on some other things because, quite honestly, the first 6 months of this year, the reconciliation bill, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, has been sucking up all the oxygen out of the room. But now that we get this opportunity, it's important to note that I've got a couple of bills I want to tell you about.
So the two bills he's talking about make changes to air quality and clean water federal regulations. In general, we're talking about unwinding some of those regulations. Finally, Derek Dooley, who's not an elected official and did not appear on stage, was in the audience. He was also working the room, working the hallway. We spoke to him for a few minutes.
I've been out 2 weeks, and we're slowly talking to the media, meeting with a lot of voters, and all this is going to come. I got all the positions on everything, but, we got to focus on, the beginning. And first is who I am and what I represent.
I did ask him about some recent reporting, along with some attack ads about him not voting in a number of elections.
Like I said, I voted for Donald Trump and I voted for Governor Kemp, and there were some times when I didn't vote. I was working and focused on my family and moving state to state. But when I got a change in COVID, that's what really got me off the sidelines and got me back engaged.
Dooley referring there to the COVID pandemic and its aftermath as the reason he got involved in politics. The Washington Examiner reported voter records show he didn't vote in 2016 when he was in Texas and in 2020 when he was in New York. As he said, he did vote in the 2024 elections here in Georgia.
Okay, so the next day, Thursday, you headed to an event with Vice President J.D. Vance, and you were telling me earlier this was really high energy and it felt kind of like a big campaign event.
Absolutely, Brendan. Let me take our audience up the interstate from Columbus over to Peachtree City and the Alta Industrial Refrigeration Plant. It absolutely had that campaign rally feel to it. We had to deal with Secret Service. There were risers. There was a stage, people waiting in line to get in. Some of the national reporters that you see during the campaign, they made reappearances. It really felt like, as we said at the top of the show, it's 2026 in the campaign. We're in campaign mode. Before the vice president spoke, the crowd heard from Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, who's running for governor, along with the 3 Republican Senate candidates we just heard from, touting different parts of the Trump agenda. And most notably, Derek Dooley, this time on the stage, and my first time hearing him give a campaign speech.
And I'm going to say this. All right, just like we had an outsider as president come in, not accept business as usual in Washington, and deliver results, I think we need more of that in the U.S. Senate, and that's the approach I'm going to take. I'm going to always focus on results, and I'm going to always put Georgians first. Thank you very much.
A couple of thoughts. His speech was rich on sports references, calling himself an outsider, connecting himself to President Trump, attacking Senator Ossoff, but not attacking his Republican opponents.
All right, now let's talk a little bit about the vice president. Vance talked about the massive Republican tax and spending bill and also about trade policy, all while standing on a stage set up on a manufacturing floor.
But if you make it overseas, if you try to do something with a foreign worker as opposed to an American worker, if you try to ship our great American jobs and great American factories overseas, then you are going to pay a big fat tariff before you bring that crap back into the United States of America.
Hey, Brendan, you remember earlier that comment from Senator Ossoff? Mm-hmm. The effects of tariffs will continue to be argued by both sides, whether they're inflationary, whether they're bringing manufacturing jobs back to the United States, and what's being done with tariff dollars that are being collected by the federal government. Vance also took questions from the media during the rally, including my question on whether the Trump administration will send troops to Atlanta.
What we've done is we have focused on Washington, D.C. because it's a federal city under our jurisdiction, but we certainly hope that whether it's Atlanta or anywhere else, people are going to look around and say, we don't have to live like this. It turns out if you just go and arrest the bad guys, you can have cities and streets that are safe again. And we hope that people see what we're doing in Washington, D.C. and follow our example all across the country.
After the event, I talked to an attendee, Alicia Nickel of Sonoya, who believes troops should be put in every city, including Atlanta.
We've been here for a year, and we really haven't been able to venture in Atlanta so much because it doesn't seem too safe. So I wouldn't mind it.
And we should add that according to the Atlanta Police Department, at the end of 2024, crime was down an average of 5% year over year.
Brendan, I wanted to talk about another national figure who came to Georgia this week. That's Democratic California Congressman Rahul Khanna. The event was called the Benefits Over Billionaires Town Hall. It was held at the Teamsters building in the Lakewood area of Atlanta. I started in a small room where a number of young Democrats had gathered. Khanna is a notable progressive Democrat who represents Silicon Valley. He speaks of things like economic patriotism and progressive capitalism, which he was asked about by one of the young Democrats.
What I believe is that we need free enterprise, we need innovation, we need entrepreneurship in this country, but we need it working not just for the few, but for everyone. And that means that everyone should have health care from the day they're born. That means that we should have 1,000 trade schools and free public college. That means that we should have a living wage. That means that we should have housing that's part of the fabric of the community available for everyone, and rents not going higher than inflation.
Khanna is pushing a very progressive agenda for the Democratic Party, a move toward younger leadership, younger elected officials with new ideas, being pro-union. Look, we were at a Teamsters hall. When I got to talk to Congressman Khanna, I asked about Democrats who want the party to move to the center on issues.
No one in America wants the same old. The same old has filled this country. It led to the hollowing out of industry. It has led to the largest income inequality we have seen since the 1920s. It has led to young families not knowing if their kids are going to have a good paying job, if they're going to be able to afford a house, if they're going to be able to take a vacation.
The bottom line of what he said to the young Democrats in that room and then the bigger audience in the Union Hall is that Democrats need to focus on progressive economic issues. Brendan, I want to leave you with a fun fact to wrap up the show. Congressman Rahul Khanna was an intern at the Carter Center in 1996 and was in the same class as Jason Carter, the former president's grandson.
Wow, what a small world. Well, Rahul, thanks for all that great reporting. That's all the time we have for this edition of Plugged In from WABE.
Plugged In is produced and hosted by Brendan Rivers. Our managing editor is Alex Helmick.
Plugged In is available wherever you want to listen. If you listen on demand, make sure to head on over to the Plugged In feed to subscribe and leave us a rating.
You can also now find us on the radio at 90.1 every Friday morning from 9:30 to 10.
And remember, as public media faces an uncertain funding stream, you can support this work with a gift at wabe.org/donate. I'm WABE's Brendan Rivers, in for Sam Greenglass.
I'm WABE politics reporter Rahul Bali. We'll see you next week.